Could a quarter in your change be connected to a $152,000 plus collector claim? These four-state quarters look normal at first, but one was struck on unusual metal. Another hides a rare mint-marked story, and others can reveal dramatic production mistakes. The clues get stranger with every coin. There is something almost strange about seeing a bison skull on an American quarter. No monument. No president on the reverse. No famous building. Just a weathered symbol of the American West floating above a wide Montana landscape. And that image is exactly where the story of the 2007 Montana State Quarter should begin. Released in 2007 as the 41st coin in the 50 State Quarters program, the Montana Quarter represents a state known as Big Sky Country. Montana entered the Union in 1889, and the reverse carries that date beneath one of the most distinctive designs in the entire State Quarter series. A bison skull. The image was chosen to represent Montana's rugged landscape, history, and independent character. But for a collector, that skull can become something else. A map. Because once you know what a normal Montana quarter should look like, every strange line, missing layer, misplaced design, or unusual piece of metal suddenly becomes much easier to notice. Start with the skull itself. Look at the horns. Follow the outline. Study the forehead and the open landscape behind it. Then look at the words Big Sky Country. You're not simply searching for something that looks unusual. You are asking whether the metal tells a story that could have begun inside the mint. That is a very different question. Millions of Montana quarters were produced for circulation at both Philadelphia and Denver. Philadelphia struck about 257 million pieces, while Denver produced roughly 256.24 million. So the normal coin is not rare just because it carries the Montana design. That actually makes the hunt more interesting. When hundreds of millions of normal coins exist, the valuable conversation begins only when one individual example separates itself from the crowd. And sometimes that difference is dramatic. Imagine a quarter that was supposed to be struck on a normal quarter planchet, but another coin somehow became involved first. This sounds almost impossible until you look at documented error coins. Heritage Auctions sold a remarkable 2007 D Montana quarter that had been struck over an already struck dime. Parts of the dime design remained visible underneath the Montana quarter design. The result looked like two different coins fighting for space on the same piece of metal. That certified error sold for $9,600 in August 2024. And there is another documented Montana quarter that was struck over a previously struck cent. You could still see parts of the Lincoln Memorial beneath Washington's portrait and other traces of the cent underneath the quarter design. That example sold for $8,400. Now the Montana quarter becomes much more interesting because we're no longer talking about a tiny scratch or a random mark. We're talking about evidence from two denominations appearing on one coin. That is the kind of clue that makes a collector stop immediately. So if you were examining your own 2007 Montana quarter, look for features that should not logically be there. A second design. Unexpected lettering. A strange outline beneath Washington. Parts of another denomination. An abnormal diameter. Or a coin that simply does not fit the physical characteristics of a normal quarter. Now bring in the scale. A standard circulating Montana State quarter should weigh approximately 5.67 grams and measure about 24.3 millimeters across. The edge should be reeded. Those specifications may sound routine, but when you suspect a wrong planchet or double denomination error, they become extremely useful. Suppose the coin is noticeably smaller than a normal quarter. That matters. Suppose the weight is far from 5.67 grams. That matters too. But the strongest case appears when the physical measurements and the visible design evidence agree with each other. That is exactly why error collecting is an investigation rather than a guessing game. Now, turn the coin back to Washington's portrait. The state quarter obverse looks familiar, but this side can reveal clues that the dramatic reverse hides. Look around Washington's face. Check the lettering. Study the mint mark if your coin has a P or D. Then inspect the rim. If the coin was struck on the wrong planchet or over another denomination, the design may not fit the available metal normally. Letters can disappear. Parts of Washington may be incomplete. The rim may look wrong. And traces of the underlying coin may appear where no normal quarter should show them. There is even a documented 2007 D Montana quarter struck on a 2007 D nickel. The smaller nickel-size piece showed evidence of both strikes, including remnants of Monticello beneath the Montana quarter design. That certified error sold for $3,220 back in 2009. 3 different coins: a dime, a cent, a nickel, and each one shows us something important. The real value is not hiding in the Montana date. It is hiding in what happened during production. Now let's bring in the number connected to this coin: $82,600. Could an ordinary 2007 Montana quarter from Pocket Change automatically be worth $82,600? No. The documented market evidence does not support treating a normal Montana quarter as an $82,600 coin. Even dramatic certified errors like the double denomination examples we just examined have sold for thousands rather than tens of thousands. So for one Montana quarter to justify a figure around $82,600, the evidence would need to be extraordinary. An exceptionally rare and authenticated production error. A unique or nearly unique combination of mistakes. Exceptional preservation. Strong provenance. Or another documented characteristic significant enough to push that particular specimen far beyond known ordinary examples. That is how the $82,600 figure should be approached. Not as a promise, as a challenge. What would the coin have to show to deserve that kind of number? And suddenly, the bison skull becomes the perfect symbol for this investigation. At first, it is simply part of the design. Then you begin looking around it, behind it, across the lettering, along the rim, into the edge, and eventually beneath the visible design itself. Because the most fascinating Montana quarter may not be the one with the cleanest skull or the brightest surface. It may be the one showing evidence of a completely different coin underneath. That is why this first state quarter sets up the rest of the video perfectly. These coins were created to tell the stories of individual states. But every once in a while, the mint accidentally gives one of them a second story. And those are the quarters collectors never forget. This quarter was designed to remember America's Industrial Revolution. But in 2019, one tiny letter turned it into a completely different kind of treasure hunt. The 2019 Lowell Quarter does not begin with mountains, wildlife, or a famous monument. It begins inside a factory. Turn the coin over, and you'll see a young mill worker operating a power loom. Behind her, through the window, appears part of the historic Lowell Mill District, including the Butt Mill Clock Tower. It is one of the most mechanical-looking designs in the America, the Beautiful Quarter series. And that makes it perfect for an inspection. The Lowell National Historical Park Quarter honored Massachusetts and the city's enormous role in America's Industrial Revolution. It was the first America, the Beautiful Quarter released in 2019 and the 46th design in the entire program. But the park collectors remember most about 2019 wasn't printed across the reverse. It was hiding on the other side. A single letter. VU. For the first time, the United States Mint deliberately produced circulating quarters bearing the West Point Mint's W mint mark and released them directly into everyday commerce. And Lowell was part of that experiment. The Mint produced only 2 million West Point examples of each of the 5 2019 America, the Beautiful designs, including Lowell. They were mixed into bags of ordinary Philadelphia and Denver quarters and sent into circulation. That meant someone could receive one in normal change without realizing they had just found a much scarcer modern quarter. So before you study the mill girl, flip the coin to Washington. Look beside the portrait. If you see a P, you have a Philadelphia issue. If you see a D, Denver. But if that tiny letter is W, stop. That changes the conversation immediately. The 2019 W. Lowell had a mintage of only 2 million pieces, dramatically fewer than the normal circulating issues. And unlike many collector coins that were sold directly in special packaging, these W quarters were intentionally placed into circulation. That means condition became part of the hunt from the very beginning. Some were discovered quickly. Others spent time in pockets, cash drawers, coin counters, vending machines, and bankrolls before collectors recognized them. Now look at Washington's cheek. Study the open field around his portrait. A quarter can technically be uncirculated and still show distracting contact marks from being handled in bulk. That matters when collectors begin comparing higher-grade examples. But don't stay on the obverse too long. The Lowell reverse gives you a completely different inspection challenge. Start with the power loom. The machinery contains small lines and detailed shapes. Then look at the mill worker. Study the outline of her arms and body. Move toward the circular bobbin battery. Then look through the window toward the clock tower. Complex designs like this can make unusual marks difficult to interpret. A small hit may look like an extra line. Weakly struck detail may look missing. A scrape can imitate something that appears to be part of the machinery. So instead of asking, "Does this look strange?" ask, "Does this make sense as something created during production?" That single question changes the way you hunt errors. Now, check the inscriptions. Lowell, Massachusetts. E pluribus unum. If you believe you see doubling, compare the shapes carefully with a normal specimen. True mint, made doubling, should show consistent characteristics connected to the die or strike. Random displaced metal after circulation tells a different story. Now, there is another test that becomes useful when a quarter looks truly abnormal. Weight. A normal circulating Lowell quarter should weigh approximately 5.67 grams. Its diameter is around 24.3 millimeters. The edge is reeded, and normal circulation pieces use copper nickel-clad outer layers bonded over a copper center. If your quarter is dramatically outside those specifications, the investigation gets more interesting. But don't let one measurement make the decision. Imagine finding a Lowell quarter that is unusually small and light. That could raise a planchet question. Now imagine that the design also appears incomplete because the normal quarter dies did not fit the available metal. Two clues now support each other. That is much stronger than a strange scale reading alone. Or perhaps the coin is significantly off-center. Part of the design is missing, but the remaining elements show a proper strike and an unusual blank area. Again, the physical evidence has to match the minting process. That's the difference between collecting errors and simply collecting damaged coins. But with the Lowell quarter, there's another form of rarity that requires no dramatic error at all. The W Mint mark itself. The U.S. Mint made only 10 million W quarters across all 5 2019 designs, 2 million Lowell pieces among them, and intentionally scattered them into circulation to encourage people to search their change. For modern U.S. coin collectors, that made 2019 feel like a national treasure hunt. And that brings us to the supplied potential figure, $45,500 plus. Could you find a normal 2019 Lowell quarter with a P or D mint mark and automatically call it a $45,500 coin? No. Even a W mint mark by itself does not automatically justify a number that large. For one individual Lowell quarter to reach an extraordinary value level like $45,500 or more, the coin would need extraordinary evidence behind it. Perhaps a major authenticated mint error, a very unusual wrong planchet strike, a dramatic multiple strike, a unique combination of production mistakes, an exceptional discovery pedigree, or another extreme characteristic that places the individual coin far outside the normal market. The supplied number should make you investigate. It should never replace the investigation. And that is what makes this coin so different from the Montana quarter we just examined. Montana asked us to look beneath the visible design for evidence of another denomination. Lowell asks you to look at one tiny letter first. P, D, or W. Then the rest of the coin tells you what happens next. Study the loom. Check the worker. Look through the window. Inspect the clock tower. Examine the lettering. Check the edge. Confirm the weight. And if you find the W mint mark, remember why it exists. In 2019, the United States Mint deliberately placed a limited number of collectible quarters into everyday circulation and challenged ordinary people to find them. For once, the treasure hunt wasn't an accident. It was part of the plan. And with 2 more quarters still coming in this video, the next valuable clue may have nothing to do with the mint mark at all. 12 seconds changed aviation forever. And on the right 2001 North Carolina quarter, one manufacturing mistake can change the entire coin. The reverse of this quarter captures a moment that lasted less time than many people spend looking for their keys. December 17th, 1903. The Wright brothers' flyer rises from the ground on North Carolina's Outer Banks, with Orville right at the controls and Wilbur watching nearby. That first powered flight lasted just 12 seconds. Almost a century later, the United States Mint placed that moment onto the 2001 North Carolina State Quarter. The coin became the 12th design released in the 50-state quarters program, and the reverse was based on the famous photograph of the Wright brothers' first flight. And that gives us an unusual way to inspect this third coin. Instead of beginning with Washington, begin with the airplane. Look at the wings. Study the thin framework. Follow the lower edge of the aircraft. Then look at Wilbur Wright standing beneath it. Finally, examine the words first flight. There are a lot of narrow lines and small details packed into this design. That means circulation marks, weak strikes, displaced metal, and genuine minting abnormalities can all compete for your attention. The challenge is figuring out which one you're actually seeing. Now, look at the outside of the coin. Does the entire reverse fit normally inside the rim? That question matters more than you might expect, because one of the most fascinating documented North Carolina quarters was not even struck on a quarter planchet. It was struck on a cent planchet. Think about what that means. Quarter dies are designed for a much larger blank. A cent planchet gives them far less metal to work with. So when the North Carolina quarter design was struck onto that smaller piece, large portions of the outer design simply had nowhere to appear. The result is immediately different from an ordinary quarter. In one certified 2001 P example, the centering preserved the Wright brothers' plane and Wilbur Wright, while portions of the peripheral inscriptions were missing because the cent-size planchet could not hold the complete quarter design. Heritage Auctions sold that MS-64 red error for $9,000 in August 2024. That is an important comparison because it shows what serious error evidence looks like. The coin did not become valuable because someone noticed a strange scratch near the airplane. The entire physical object was wrong. Wrong size. Wrong planchet. Incomplete quarter design. Copper-colored cent surface. Multiple characteristics all supporting the same explanation. And that gives you a practical way to think about your own coin. A normal North Carolina circulation quarter should weigh approximately 5.67 grams, measure about 24.30 millimeters, and have a reeded edge. Both Philadelphia and Denver produce the issue. If you find one that seems dramatically smaller, the scale suddenly becomes very useful. A normal quarter reading close to 5.67 grams tells one story. A much lighter coin with an obviously incomplete design tells another. But the evidence needs to agree. That is the key. Now flip the quarter to Washington. Check the mint mark. If you see P, the coin came from Philadelphia. If you see D, Denver. Philadelphia struck about 627.6 million North Carolina quarters, while Denver produced approximately 427.876 million. So neither ordinary circulation issue becomes rare simply because of its mint mark. Instead, ask whether something happened to this individual piece. Look at Washington's portrait, then the rim, then the lettering. If the quarter was struck on an undersized planchet, sections near the outer edge may be missing because the metal was physically too small to receive the full design. That is completely different from a normal quarter that has been worn down or damaged after leaving the mint. And wrong planchet errors are not the only possibility. A North Carolina quarter can also show other genuine production problems. A large clip planchet can remove a curved section of the coin. Multiple strikes can leave duplicated designs in different positions. Missing clad layers can create dramatically different color and surface characteristics. These errors exist, but their auction results also teach us something important about value. For example, a certified 2001P North Carolina quarter with a 25% clip planchet sold for $288 in December 2024. Another spectacular 2001P example was struck 4 times, with later strikes about 40% off-center. It sold for $1,128.50 in March 2026. And a certified example with the reverse-clad layer missing sold for $292.80 in March 2026. Notice what is happening here. All of these are real mint errors. All are much more unusual than an ordinary quarter, but they do not all sell for the same amount. Visual drama alone does not determine value. The specific error, its rarity, condition, high appeal, certification, and collector demand all matter. Now we can bring in the supplied figure attached to this coin, $103,000 plus. That number is certainly powerful enough to make anyone inspect a quarter twice. But a regular 2001 North Carolina quarter is not automatically worth anything close to $103,000. Even a verified cent planchet example we just discussed, a dramatic and obvious wrong planchet error, sold for $9,000. So a North Carolina quarter approaching $103,000 would need evidence far beyond an ordinary example. You would be looking for something truly exceptional, perhaps an extreme and exceptionally rare wrong planchet combination, a unique multi-error coin, an extraordinary double denomination, a major documented discovery with very few comparable pieces, or some other authenticated production event important enough to create serious competition among advanced error collectors. That is why the number should be the beginning of the investigation, not the conclusion. Go back to the airplane. Does every part of the design belong there? Look at Wilbur Wright. Study first flight. Check the rim. Turn the coin over. Identify P or D. Check Washington. Inspect the reeded edge. Then confirm the weight. The ordinary North Carolina quarter tells one of America's greatest stories. But the extraordinary one may tell 2 stories at once. The story the mint intended to place on the coin, and the story of what accidentally happened while that coin was being made. And with one final state quarter still ahead, our last coin will need a completely different clue to top that. Some 1999 Georgia quarters did something no normal state quarter was supposed to do. They helped test the metal for an entirely different U.S. coin. That makes our 4th and final coin a perfect place to end this hunt. At first, the 1999 Georgia state quarter looks cheerful and simple. A peach sits in the center. The outline of Georgia surrounds it. Live oak branches frame the design. And above everything appears the state motto: wisdom, justice, moderation. But underneath that familiar design is one of the strangest stories from the beginning of the entire state quarters era. Georgia was only the 4th design released in the program. This was 1999. Americans were still getting used to the idea that the reverse of the quarter could change several times in a single year. Delaware came first, then Pennsylvania, then New Jersey. And on July 19th, Georgia entered circulation. Philadelphia and Denver both produced enormous numbers. The Philadelphia mint struck more than 451 million Georgia quarters. Denver produced more than 488 million. So a normal 1999 Georgia quarter is not scarce simply because it comes from the first year of the state quarters program. But forget normal for a moment, because this is where the color of the coin becomes part of the mystery. Imagine finding a Georgia quarter that does not have the usual gray-silver appearance. Instead, it looks golden, not painted, not plated by someone afterward, actually different in the metal itself. That should immediately raise a question. And in the case of certain 1999 P Georgia quarters, there is an extraordinary explanation. Around this time, the United States Mint was preparing for the introduction of the new Sacagawea dollar. The Mint experimented with different metallic compositions as it worked toward the distinctive golden-colored alloy associated with that upcoming dollar. And somehow, a very small number of state quarters were struck on experimental planchets connected to those tests. Georgia was one of them. Now stop and think about what that means. You're looking at a state quarter design on metal that was never intended to become an ordinary circulating Georgia quarter. That is a completely different category from a normal scratch, weak strike, or minor surface anomaly. And it gives you an immediate inspection strategy. Start with color. A normal 1999 circulation quarter should have the familiar copper nickel-clad appearance. If the coin looks strongly golden, yellow-green, or otherwise dramatically different, do not jump directly to a conclusion. Color alone can be altered after a coin leaves the mint. But then check the second clue. Weight. A standard Georgia quarter should weigh approximately 5.67 grams. Its diameter is about 24.3 millimeters, and the edge should be reeded. The known experimental planchet Georgia quarters can be heavier and thicker than ordinary quarters. So now imagine several clues appearing together. Unusual golden color, abnormal weight, greater thickness, different rim characteristics, and a professional examination confirming the metal itself is unusual. That is no longer one strange feature. That is a case. And one certified 1999 P Georgia quarter struck on a golden experimental planchet provides an incredible real-world example. It was graded MS67 by PCGS. Heritage Auctions sold it in January 2020 for $7,200. That coin was not valuable simply because it showed a peach. It was valuable because the metal underneath that peach belonged to an extremely unusual chapter in U.S. Mint experimentation. Another certified MS67 Georgia experimental planchet quarter sold through Heritage for $4,320 in January 2022. That example displayed the color of the Sacagawea dollar and unusual rim characteristics connected to its experimental composition. Now compare that with an ordinary Georgia quarter. Same year, same basic reverse, same Washington portrait, but a completely different manufacturing story. This is why the scale becomes so important with this particular coin. On our earlier quarters, weight was one inspection tool among many. Here, it can become part of the main mystery. If your Georgia quarter gives a normal reading close to 5.67 grams and looks like an ordinary clad quarter, that supports the normal explanation. If it is significantly different and the physical appearance also seems unusual, then the investigation deserves to go further. Now, turn the coin to the reverse. Look closely at the peach. Examine the leaves. Follow the outline of Georgia. Then inspect the oak branches. Most collectors will naturally focus on the central peach, but with a genuine experimental planchet coin, the real secret is not in one tiny design detail. It is underneath the entire design, the material itself. And that makes this coin fundamentally different from the previous three. The Montana quarter gave us dramatic double denomination errors where another coin's design could remain visible underneath. The Lowell Quarter gave us the deliberate W mint treasure hunt. The North Carolina quarter showed what happens when quarter dies strike the wrong size planchet. Georgia takes us even deeper. What happens when the quarter design is struck on experimental metal connected to the development of another denomination? That is the kind of story advanced era collectors remember. But now we have to confront the supplied figure attached to this final coin. $152,000 plus. Could a normal 1999 Georgia quarter be worth $152,000 simply because it is old, comes from 1999, or has a peach on the reverse? No. Could an ordinary P or D example justify that number? Again, no. Even the remarkable certified experimental planchet Georgia quarters with documented auction results have sold for thousands of dollars, not automatically six figures. So for a Georgia quarter to justify a price around $152,000 or more, the individual coin would need to be far beyond ordinary. Perhaps an extraordinary experimental composition with extreme rarity. A unique combination of planchet and striking errors. A previously undocumented production piece. Exceptional provenance. Or another authenticated characteristic so important that advanced collectors would compete aggressively for that specific specimen. The number cannot create the rarity. The coin has to prove it. So if you have a 1999 Georgia quarter, do something different from simply checking the date. Look at its color. Compare its thickness. Check the edge. Measure the weight. Inspect the rim. Identify the mint mark. Then ask whether all of those characteristics fit together. Because the most interesting Georgia quarter may not have an extra line on the peach. It may not have dramatic doubling. It may not even look damaged at all. It may simply be made from metal that was never supposed to become that quarter. For state quarters. For completely different collector mysteries. And that is exactly why the smartest coin hunters never search only for a big price. They search for the clue that explains why one coin is different from millions of others. Subscribe to Coin Clues for more rare coins, genuine mint errors, hidden varieties, and collector discoveries. And before the next quarter leaves your hand, give it one more look. Sometimes the biggest story is hiding beneath the design itself.